We're going to start off this year with something special that we've never done before. Last year, the Board of Selectmen appointed our inaugural poet laureate. Her name is Ms. Lynn Vitti. You may recognize the last name. Her husband, Tom, was our library director for 1,000 years. But Lynn has written a poem just for us on this day. And I'd like to invite Lynn Vitti to recite her poem for Memorial Day.
Thank you. In memory of Robert Steele, the little drummer boy, 1760-1833, buried in the old Westwood cemetery. We like to think mostly about old wars, the ones that seem so distant to us, distant in location, Afghanistan, Iraq, or far away in time, wars fought here on this land we occupy today. The Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, King Philip's War. We're more comfortable when the conflict is long over, compressed into a line in the high school U.S. history text. Westwood wasn't even a town yet in 1775, just a slice of a shire town when Robert Steele's rambunctious streak propelled him to the militia. 15, already looking older with a sparse beard, a man's voice, he knew how to pound out drum signals for the soldiers, for lining up, for advancing in battle, falling back. At Charlestown, they were short of bullets. The ragtag colonials were up against the king's men, fat, well uniformed. Maybe through it all, the drummer boy, when he wasn't hammering out signals, observed, stored in his memory the awful Battle of Breed's Hill. What he saw, he never wrote of. The life he lived, we know little of, only that he married a woman called Lydia, settled in West Dedham, lived a long life, died at 73. His grave's in the town's old cemetery, and his wife's next to it are well marked, well tended, duly noted on findagrave.com, on lists of Westwood trivia. We honor him each year, just as we think of our fathers, uncles, grandfathers, those of living memory who fought in Italy or France, North Africa or Korea, in the rice fields of Vietnam, in Operation Desert Storm, for freedom, for democracy, for liberty, for self-determination, all grand ideas, and sometimes for lesser causes, war is waged for, that warriors bear losses from, scars, limps, limbs lost, PTSD, addiction. Maybe Robert Steele was just a willful teenager, a runaway, like so many other drummer boys, naive as to what awaited him, kit bag in hand, a boy full of adrenaline on his way to drum at Breed's Hill, where the British beat back the colonials. Remember him. Remember all of them. But in remembering those long dead, think too of the living, those still with us, who not much older than the drummer boy found themselves in uniform, in formation at the ready, and in serving were changed utterly, for better or for worse, or both.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you to Tom McClintock, our bagpiper of many, many, many Memorial Days. Apparently I started a little prematurely because a bunch of the Brownies and Girl Scouts are still coming in and we need them to decorate the graves, so we'll slow walk it a little bit, but not too much. To kick things off, get everyone's heart jumping, we'll have a volley by the Sons of the American Revolution. That made me jump, and I knew it was coming. I guess we all did. My name's Chris McEwen. It's my privilege and honor to be the Master of Ceremonies, I guess, on this Memorial Day. I enjoy doing this every year. Spectacular day. Not a person who's out here has to be here. You chose to be here. We've all got the draw of Cape Cod and the Berkshires and Lake Winnipesaukee, the Maine coast, Green Mountains of Vermont, but we're here, as is the case in tens of thousands of cities and towns across America. And in part, that's in keeping with Abe Lincoln's words in the Gettysburg Address, which you'll hear in a little bit, but the one line that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. So we honor their memory. Interestingly enough, the first holiday, and it was sort of a scattered kind of thing, was called Decoration Day. And it remained Decoration Day until about 1971. Congress passed a law in 1968 formalizing holidays, and in 1971, Memorial Day became Decoration Day. And that is symbolic of decorating the graves. And we'll see at some point, just a few minutes from now, when the young girls of the Brownies and Girl Scouts in Westwood decorate the graves of our veterans. Before I go any further, I'd just like to introduce Reverend Catherine Miller, who will lead us in prayer to start things off. I'm sorry, Reverend Catherine Miller of the First Baptist Church.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor. Thank everyone for their service. My dad was a World War II Army veteran, and my brother was a Navy Vietnam veteran, and so thank you again. If you will, pray with me. God of eternity, I pray for your blessing upon this gathering to honor and express deepest gratitude to those fallen heroes who gave their lives for the cause of our freedom, those who sacrificed their lives in service to our country. Grant your peace and strength in overflow upon their beloved families and friends. Bless all whose time and energy went into this day's planning and events. And may everyone from senior to youth be encouraged by this special ceremony. Grant us your peace. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Miller. One more, we'll have Ariana Silva and Adeline Kelly join us to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Adeline? Ariana, come on right up here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As United States Marine. Obviously, I take the greatest pride in my service, but I have the greatest respect for all of those who have served. Now, you know my hymn, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. If you serve the United States Army, you may know your hymn to be Caissons Go Rolling Along. They changed the word just a little bit, now called Army First to Fight. If you served in our United States Navy, your hymn, Anchors Away. If you served in the United States Air Force or Army Air Corps, your hymn is known as Wild Blue Yonder. Our newest branch of service is known as the Space Force. They just unveiled their hymn and their motto. It's called Semper Supra, always above. There's also a group that not only protect our shores, but they're deployed in combat venues all over the world. Their hymn, Semper Paratus, the United States Coast Guard, always ready. And finally, there's a group that was long forgotten until an act of Congress in 1988 ordered that they will also be recognized as veterans, because you see, they supported and defended the United States of America since 1775 in both peace and in war. I'm talking about our merchant marines. Their hymn, Heave Ho, my lads, heave ho. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I respectfully request, when I sing your hymn, if you have served, had a family member who has served, been married to a serviceman or servicewoman, do me a favor. Put your paw in the air when I sing your hymn so I can properly recognize you. The order of military hymns today: the Merchant Marines, the Coast Guard, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Space Force, and then the United States Marine Corps. These are the men and women who support and defend the United States of America. Do I have any Merchant Marines on deck? Merchant Marines, where are you? Heave ho, my lads, heave ho. It's a long, long way to go. It's a long, long pull, with the hatches full, braving the wind, braving the sea, fighting our treacherous foe. Heave ho, my lads, heave ho. Though the seas blow high and low, we can cross any ocean, sail any river. Give us those goods and we'll deliver. Down the submarines, we're the men of the Merchant Marines. Do I have any Coast Guardsmen on deck? Coast Guard, where are you? We're always ready for the call. We place our trust in thee. Through surf and storm and howling gale, I shall our purpose be. The Semper Paratus is our guide, our fame and glory to fight, to save, and fight, to die. I, Coast Guard, we are for you. Where's my army? Let me see it. To fight for the right and to build a nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fight until the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. Up on its high, high, hey, the army's on its way. Call up your cadence out and stroll. For wherever we go, you will always know that the army goes rolling along. Where's my Navy? Up. Anchors away, my boys, anchors away. Farewell to college joys, we sail at break of day. Through our last night on shore, steering to the floor, until we meet once more. Here's wishing you a happy voyage home. Where's my Air Force or Army Air Corps? Off we go into the wild blue yonder, flying high into the sun. Oh, down we dive, spread our flames from under, pat and bob, give 'em the guard. Off we go, soon to meet our thunder, up in one hell of a roar. We live in fame or down in flame. Nothing can stop the U.S. Air Force. Do I have anybody from the Space Force here? We're the mighty watchful eye, guardians beyond the blue. The invisible front line, war fighters brave and true, boldly reaching into space. There's no limit to our sky, on guard both night and day, where the Space Force from on high. All right, Marines, lock your bodies up. From the halls of Montezuma up to the shores of Tripoli, oh, we will fight our country's battles in the air, on land, and the sea. Always to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. Oh, we are proud to claim the title of United States Marines. From our merchant marines to our Coast Guardsmen, our Army, our Navy, our Air Force, our Space Force, our United States Marine Corps, we wish you Godspeed and stay safe. Now, before I'm done, are there any CBs on deck? Right over here. Let me tell you what, if I sing my military medley and I don't recognize the CBs, they will come up afterwards and they'll say, son, you didn't sing my song. And I'll say, I'm so sorry, what'd you serve? I'm a CB. Oh, Navy CBs, anchors away. And they immediately say, no, no, no. We have our own hymn, you learn it. Yes, sir. I found out that in the early 1940s, one of the greatest entertainers of all time made this hymn famous. She stepped up in front of the Army Orchestra and recorded the Song of the Seabees. You may know her from singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, but the great Judy Garland made the Song of the Seabees famous. This is for you, sir. Seabees of the Navy, we can build and we can fight. We'll pave a way to victory and guard it day and night. And we'll promise that we'll remember the 7th of December. Oh, we're the Seabees of the Navy, the bees of the 7 seas. The Navy wanted men, that's where we came in. Mr. Brown, Mr. Jones, the Owens, the Cohens, the Flynn. The Navy wanted more of Uncle Sammy's kin, so we all joined up and a brother in it to win. We're the Seabees of the Navy, the canoe man in green. In a war and peace you'll find us ready on the scene. And no matter what the mission, with our past we'll keep tradition. Oh, we're the Seabees of the Navy, the bees of the 7 seas, the bees of the 7 seas.
Thanks, Dan. Love that. And thank you for adding the CBs. That's a first. For all you youngsters out there that are wondering, what is a CB? It's the letters CB for Construction Battalion. And if you look that up and see the work that they do, it's pretty remarkable. I'd now like to invite Olivia Marino, an 8th grader at Thurston Middle School, to recite the Gettysburg Address.
67 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hollow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us the living rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. Abraham Lincoln, November 19th, 1863.
Olivia, thank you very much, and I appreciate the emphasis you put on a couple particular phrases. At this point, we have a few speakers. I want to first welcome our selectmen. We have State Representative Paul McMurtry and Senator Michael Rush joining us, as well as our Grand Marshal Robert Zimian. And before I introduce Mary Ann LeBlanc, I want to welcome our newest selectman, Joe Prevotera, and thank Michael Walsh for his years of service on the select board. But I would like to introduce Mary Ann LeBlanc Cummings to say a few words, and then she will tell us about our Grand Marshal.
Good morning. My fellow residents, honored guests, Senator Rush, Representative McMurtry, and Grand Marshal Zimian. My name is Mary Ann LeBlanc Cummings, and as the chair of Westwood Select Board, and on behalf of my colleagues, Rob Gotti and Joe Prevotera, it is my privilege to welcome you to Westwood's Memorial Day observance ceremonies. This morning's wonderful parade and this beautiful ceremony are both due to the work of many individuals whom we must thank, including Tish Healy, Mary Ellen LaRose, Dottie Powers, Chris McEwen, Dick Pastor, and the entire American Legion Post 320, our community volunteers, including the Westwood Brownies, and all of the dedicated members of Westwood's fire, police, and public works departments. On this most solemn day, we remember and we honor those who lost their lives in protecting our country and our freedoms. The presence of each of you here today bears witness to our community's deep gratitude and respect for the bravery and commitment of our service members who made the ultimate sacrifice, along with their families who continue to carry the burden of that sacrifice, none more than our Gold Star mother, Mrs. Christine Devlin. Mrs. Devlin's son, Lance Corporal Michael Devlin, was killed in Beirut in 1983 at the age of 21 when his Marine barracks were attacked. Lance Corporal Devlin was a graduate of Westwood High School, and he was the fifth of Mrs. Devlin's 7 children. Mrs. Devlin is unable to be with us today, but when I met with her last week, she told me that she wanted her son to be remembered as a funny and artistic young man who gave his life for his country. For Mrs. Devlin, Memorial Day comes not once a year, but every day. We too must never forget those who gave the last full measure of devotion. We must honor their legacy, and we must attempt to repay the unpayable debt we owe them by living our lives in the kindness of service to one another and to our community, and by living the American values they died for. It is now my distinct honor to introduce this year's Grand Marshal, the Honorable Robert Zimian. Judge Zimian served for 25 years as a pilot in the United States Navy, achieving the rank of Lieutenant Commander, 5 years on active duty, and 20 years in the Navy Reserve, including a 9-month tour of duty in Operation Desert Storm. Following his active service, Judge Zimian became a lawyer and an assistant district attorney in Essex and Suffolk counties. He served as director of drug enforcement for the Mass Committee on Criminal Justice and in private practice before he was elevated to the Massachusetts District Court in 1989, where he served until his retirement. While on the bench, among his other accomplishments, Judge Zimian was instrumental in the creation of the Veterans Court in Massachusetts. He also served as commander of the American Legion Post 320 here in Westwood for 3 years, and he remains a very active member. He and his wife Carol raised their 2 children here in Westwood. In short, Judge Zimian's entire life has been one of extraordinary public service. Please join me in welcoming our Grand Marshal, the Honorable Robert Zimian.
Well, thank you all. It is just a great honor for me to be the Grand Marshal for this year's Memorial Day Parade, to honor those who sacrificed so much to preserve freedom in our country. I want to thank Select Board Chairman Marianne Cummings for saying such great things. It wasn't that great. I want to thank Dottie Powers, Michelle Miller, Westwood's procurement manager, and all members of the team that put this event together and does it every single year. I want to also thank the honored guests, especially Senator Rush and Representative Palmer Berkeley, who are here, and Gold Star Mother athlete Christine Devlin, who I've known for years and years, and it's such a sad thing for her youngest son. And I also want to thank any organization that are represented by a lot of organizations here that participated in this event. On a personal level, I want to thank Commander Richard Pastor. He was now commander of Legion Post 320, and he's been very effective and such an effective leader for the past 10 years. We keep electing him, even though he might not want to be every single year, every single time for the last 10 years. But he has been a phenomenal director and also with the baseball team for Post 320. I was helped put my speech together by my wife, Carol, and I didn't put this in the notes here, but I want to thank her for all she's done for me and the family. I was a Navy pilot for 25 years, 5 years of active duty, as you heard, and then flew out of South Weymouth for 20 years. I enjoyed every minute of that. I enjoyed every minute of my career in the law. And when I was away, and Desert Storm was the last time, there were others, she maintained the family in a way that's phenomenal. Thank you so much. In remembrance, I want to remember, first of all, someone from Westwood, Harry Lent. He was a Marine who served in Vietnam, and then he became a lawyer, did a great job as a lawyer. He was a great supporter of the American Legion Post 320, and one of the reasons that I joined, he urged me to join, and I loved being a member of Post 320. He was a dedicated family man who unfortunately died too early due to cancer, in my opinion, caused by exposure to Agent Orange while serving as a Marine in Vietnam. But I want to honor him as well. My experience with aviators who died while serving in the military were several. People I knew quite well who died in accidents and while on patrol. A P3 unit, very good friend of mine, they crashed. They were hunting for Russian submarines, and he died along with the rest of the crew. A friend, this is a funny story for me, because as an aviator, I went through 12 weeks of basic training, and one of the sergeants, we had Marine sergeants, tough guys, who set us straight for the following probably a year and a half of training to be a Navy pilot. And this fellow was Sergeant TV Baugh. Interesting name. He was an American Indian, now you have to call them Native Americans, who had joined at age 17. He was now 22, and he was a staff sergeant, which is an amazing accumulation through the rank structure. And he, at the end, he confessed to us when we all graduated that he had applied to be a Navy aviator. He was accepted and became an aviator. And then he went to Vietnam, a successful aviator. Not all people who train are successful completing the courses, but unfortunately he was flying a Huey and he was shot down in Vietnam and died. And I think about him on every Memorial Day, about how intensive he was and how much greatness he applied being in Vietnam as a foot soldier, if I can use that term, and then as an aviator before he was killed. I can't get away from that. Sometimes people ask me why so many people die in training. Most die in battle. And there were two recent helicopter crashes in New York. They crashed into each other, and they cost both crews their lives. I tell them that all training, at all levels in the military, is done to closely simulate real-life situations that they will face when they come against the enemy or enemies that threaten our freedom and our country. And for that reason, we do have these catastrophes, unfortunately, that do happen. One other topic I want to discuss about invisible wounds, and then go back to Harry Lent. That was an invisible wound that he suffered. And so often, people who serve this country experience when they return home from duty, with PTSD, other psychiatric problems, and substance abuse disorders, have a suicide rate, as you probably know, twice that of the rest of the general population. So when I came back from Desert Storm, I became more involved with this. And in my experience with the criminal justice system, assistant DA and district court judge, I and all others developed treatment courts back, and the first one in all of New England was my court in 1995. And all of those treatment courts, veterans courts, developed as well, and focused on so many of the problems that returning veterans experience. And part of that was I had worked with the VA. I actually worked with the VA because the treatment people that work for me told me about what the VA did, and we accomplished some changes in the way the VA worked with returning veterans to improve their stabilities and everything they do. Finally, I'm not going to talk very long here. I learned also that engagement is so important for returning veterans. And if I can, I'm going to show you a hat that I wear continually to identify veterans. It identifies me as a veteran, and I've met so many veterans coming in and out of stores. The last one I met was a week ago, and we talked for 15 minutes. And I know that engagement for veterans is critically important in their continued survival and continued progress. So I'm going to urge any veterans here, and I appreciate you coming and being involved in saluting the people who made the ultimate sacrifice, but you also can help by engaging with people, veterans who are returning. Finally, to paraphrase a 19th century philosopher, John Stuart Mill, way back, and I agree totally with this, and I hope you all do too, or not. A person who has nothing for which he or she is willing to fight and die for is miserable and has no or little chance of joy or freedom in this great country. So with that said, I want to thank all veterans. I take my hat off to all veterans, and I hope that you can help other veterans, troubled veterans, survive and return to a regular life. And I appreciate everyone who has come here to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Judge. I was very proud of myself, by the way, figuring out how to get those banners to stay up back there in the wind, but these not so much. Judge Zimian mentioned the Veterans Treatment Courts. I've been a mentor over at the Veterans Treatment Court in Dedham, I don't know, 6, 7 years. And when I first started, I really was engaged with it, and I knew there was a gentleman in Westwood who would do the same, and his name was Chris Haynes, Colonel Chris Haynes. And Chris has been at this ceremony forever, I mean, every single one, and he was a stalwart supporter of all veterans for anything. Chris passed away in November, and I just wanted to acknowledge his memory. With that, I'd like to introduce State Representative Paul McMurtry to say a few words.
Good morning. I'm humbled to be here on this beautiful day as we pause and reflect as individual citizens, a grateful community and commonwealth, and an indebted nation, to pay our respect and modest tribute to the men and women who have made the ultimate sacrifice while wearing the uniform of our country. And as state representative, I'm honored to join you and my colleagues in government, including Senator Mike Rush, Select Board members Gotti, Cummings LeBlanc, and Privatera, along with today's MC, Chris McEwen, our police and fire honor guards, the veterans and scouts, as well as our Grand Marshal, the Honorable Judge Robert Zimian. And thank you all for participating in this meaningful day of remembrance. Today we publicly assemble and respectfully acknowledge the service and sacrifice of fallen soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and are mindful as well of the unimaginable loss of their family and loved ones. And today, and every Memorial Day, we come together in a thoughtful community tradition here in Westwood and pay a sincere and deserving reverence to fallen American patriots. As we officially kick off summer, let us take a moment to reflect on the true meaning of Memorial Day. Let's commit ourselves to fulfill an obligation of service to others in the memory of all those who have died in service to us and our great nation. Let today give us a moment to remember that the lives of fallen service members have not been lost in vain here in the town of Westwood. Because of the selflessness and sacrifice of countless brave men and women, we reflect in gratitude and appreciation, and we live freely, and we are forever mindful that we honor each of them today. When we honor each of them today, we remember all of them on Memorial Day. Thank you for being here on this important and significant day to honor their memory. May God bless you and the town of Westwood.
Thank you, Representative McMurtry. And now I'd like to introduce State Senator Michael Rush, Commander, United States Navy.
Thank you and good morning. I am grateful and privileged to join you this morning to offer some brief remarks on the extreme importance of Memorial Day. As an Iraq War veteran and a commander in the United States Navy, I am both humbled and honored to be with you this morning. I would like to thank the organizers of this outstanding event. Chris McCune, thank you so much for all you do every year to make this a success, as well as Westwood Fire, Police, the American Legion. I'd like to recognize the outstanding public officials here this morning who are committed to supporting our veterans, current service members, and Gold Star families. Representative McMurtry, Select Board members Cummings, Gotti, Privatera, our elected clerk, Dottie Powers, and also a hearty congratulations to the great honor to Judge Simeon this morning as well. Today we especially honor our Gold Star families. Thank you from a grateful nation for your sacrifice you have made and continue to endure each and every day. Every person who has joined our nation's military has raised their right hand and taken a solemn oath to give their life in defense of our nation. On Memorial Day, we remember and honor those who have died in that defense of our freedoms. But today we also thank our soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen on duty around the world, 24/7, 365. As we stand here today, they are ready to give their lives at any moment. To all those brave women and men, we salute you today and every day. Their daily actions embody those memorable words of American patriot Nathan Hale, "I only regret that I have but one life to give for my country." We stand in this hallowed space to honor our true heroes, those brave women and men who did in fact pay the ultimate price. They embody the American spirit that makes our country great and forever unique in history. We are all charged here today on this Memorial Day to do our duty as citizens of this great nation to ensure that those fallen are never forgotten. Admiral Chester Nimitz said, "We have a solemn obligation, the obligation to ensure that their sacrifice will help make this a better and safer world in which to live." Leave here today and continue to do your part to make a difference and ensure that our country is great. Make every day Memorial Day. At 3 p.m. today, join the nation in a moment of silence to honor those who died in service to all of us. Ensure that our dead are remembered and that their memories live on forever in the freedoms that we enjoy because they did pay the ultimate sacrifice. They did their duty. It is our duty to make sure they did not die in vain. Thank you. God bless you all. God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Senator Rush. Before I introduce Dick Pastor, the commander of American Legion Post 320, I just want to tell you what's coming up because it's really sort of the crux of the ceremony and incorporates some things that are important. In particular, Dick is going to call for a moment of silence, and Mary Clark will lead us in a song. It's the first time Mary has sung for us. I heard her a bit this morning, and her voice is just beautiful. But as she does that, the Brownies and the Girl Scouts will decorate the graves of the veterans over here in our cemetery. And that's really the heart of the Memorial Day observance. We will then have the national anthem sung by Dick Clark, and the American Legion, the flag will be raised to full staff. And then Dan Clark will tell us the story of taps, followed by another volley. And Hank Murray, Westwood's own Hank Murray, a freshman at Westwood High School, will play taps. So please give a warm welcome to Dick Pastor, Commander of American Legion Post 320.
Thanks, Chris. So the tradition of decorating graves with flowers began on Memorial Day with local observances at burial grounds in several towns throughout the United States following the end of the Civil War. It was actually done to recognize the commitment of Union soldiers. General Logan issued a proclamation that made it more formal in 1868. By 1873, New York became the first state to recognize Memorial Day as a legal holiday and began the occasion of recognizing all those that have died in all of America's wars. In 1919, with the experiences of war fresh in their minds, World War I veterans founded the American Legion, which developed a special obligation to honor and remember all Americans who died in service to our country in all wars. American Legion National Commander Vincent Traiola recently observed that a commonly used phrase in the American Legion is "every day is Veterans Day," but for Gold Star families and the friends of those who were killed on the battlefield, every day is Memorial Day. There is also the cost paid by some who served outside the officially recognized war zones. More than 1,600 Americans lost their lives fighting in covert operations in Cold War battles that have occurred since Pearl Harbor in 1941. Many more died from disease and are not counted in the killed in action totals, but their sacrifices are the same. Danger is inherent in all military service. As Judge Simeon pointed out, there have been several Black Hawk helicopters that have crashed this spring, killing all of the crews. Sadly, the numbers of those who have died in service to our country since its inception continues to grow and now number in excess of 1 million. President Ronald Reagan once asked, "Who are these men and women who died for our freedom, and where did they come from?" Well, the answer is they represent the diverse patchwork that is the United States of America. They were rich and poor. They came from cities, farms, and suburbs. They represent every ethnicity, background, and political spectrum. They look just like any one of us here today. Their one common characteristic is that they all took an oath to die for America if called upon. We can ensure that the memories of these Americans and their sacrifices were not in vain. We can ensure that future generations understand and are taught the importance of service, sacrifice, and honor, that our freedoms were paid for with the lives of our fallen comrades. We can ensure through our own community service that our country remains strong, free, and prosperous. As we gather here today, we remain dedicated to preserving the memory of our comrades and declare our unending gratitude and support for their families. So let us take this time to remember and honor the men and women who gave their lives for this great country. Let us reflect on their courage, their sacrifice, their dedication to a cause greater than themselves. And let us recommit ourselves to the cause of freedom, justice, and democracy, so that their legacy will live on for generations to come. Again, I want to thank everyone for being here today. God bless America. God bless those who have made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. Thank you. Please join me now for a moment of silence. Uncover. Recover.
Here's to the heroes, those few down, hiding for glory, living up proud. Here's to the heroes who change our lives. Thanks to the heroes, freedom survives. Here's to the heroes who never rest. They are the chosen. We are the blessed. Here's to the heroes who inside. Here's to the heroes who do or die. Here's to the heroes who never rest. They are the chosen. We are the blessed. Here's to the heroes who inside. Here's to the heroes who do or die. Here's to the heroes who do or
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please rise for the national anthem of the United States of America, our Star-Spangled Banner. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home a captain from the Union Army in the Civil War. Heard the cries of a dying soldier one night, and he left his tent. He went out over the berm in the darkness, and he found this dying soldier, and he pulled him back into the light of his tent. To his horror, this dying soldier was his son, a Confederate soldier. His son dies in his arms. The captain asks his commanding officer, "Sir, may I have a military burial for my son?" "Denied, Captain. Your son, he is the enemy." "Sir, may I have a military band to play for my son?" "Denied, Captain. Your son is the enemy. You may choose one instrument." The captain chooses the bugle. For before going off to war, his son was a music student. And as he reached into the uniform trousers of his son, he pulls out a piece of paper with these simple notes written upon it. These notes have become the song we now use to memorialize those great men and women who have fallen in the defense of this great nation. You know this song all too well. It's Taps. In a moment, you're going to hear a rifle volley, followed immediately by taps.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mary. That was beautiful. I do have to point out that Mary and Dan, who've been with us for many, many years, became grandparents since last Memorial Day, I think about 6 months ago. Little girl. Congratulations. Hank, thank you very much. Before I welcome Reverend Catherine Miller back up to do a closing prayer, I just wanted to take a moment. Again, there's so many people involved that have been acknowledged multiple times, myself too much, quite frankly. But I do want to acknowledge Michelle Miller, who I think was pointed out by roll, but not by name. And at the end of the day, Michelle, a veteran herself of the Air Force, I forget what her rank was as an officer when she left the Air Force, but she's been with the town for many years. And she's really a key player in putting all the pieces together to make this happen, from the parade to here at the cemetery. So I just want to acknowledge Michelle and thank her very much. And please welcome Reverend Catherine Miller for a closing prayer, followed by our bagpiper will play Amazing Grace and a fade off into the trees, and that will conclude our Memorial Day ceremony. Thank you very much.
Let's just take a minute. Holy God, as we depart this special gathering, we recognize that we do not depart from your presence. Continue with us in this day and in times ahead. We will never forget the human cost of war. I pray protect our troops, our country, and our communities. Again, grant us your peace. Amen.